This is the simplest, most important thing that a lot of people get wrong. All of that was inspired by you, Elizabeth. So it's funny to hear you say it again. All right, so we have SUP Hub, Material Procurement Streamline. So what's SUP Hub? So they're solving this 1.2 trillion global building materials market that's archaic and dysfunctional. They have a role-based collaborative procurement solution to streamline workflow and enhance efficiency. They enter market by serving residential market first and then expanding to new markets like hospitality, industrial, and all construction. They have a team with domain expertise and startup experience. They have some traction and are gaining positive feedback from early adopters. It looks like they've processed $43,000 of gross merchandise value. Competition, a material distributor without warehouse. What makes them unique is the policy-driven product recommendations and compliance tool. And then thank you. So nice and concise. Elizabeth, with this quick run through, if this came across your desk, I'm curious where your mind goes when you think about this investment opportunity.
Yeah, this looks like an interesting business. I think full disclosure, we have a company that is a bit of a conflict in this space, but I am fairly familiar with this space. I have seen actually a number of their would-be competitors. I think it's a really good space. So I think if we just think about the business fundamentals, I mean, obviously people are constantly building. That's not going to change. So that's something that I like. And then the other thing is around if you can establish relationships with folks you can play long-term games with, so meaning partnerships of either people who will buy from you multiple times or partners who can bring people to you constantly, that's a great thing. And that's clearly here as well. So those are the things that stick out the most that I love about this. We can dig into some of the mechanics.
Yeah, I love it. It's cool that you're bringing some familiarity from the space. I think it changes the way that you would interpret a deck. Sometimes when you want to kind of optimize for a generalist investor who likely doesn't come with experience in a kind of more specific space. But because you have a little bit more experience, I feel like something like this problem slide maybe, kind of does its job because you're already aware of the archaic nature of this space and the market size. Do you feel like, just given your own experience can kind of check the box, okay, I understand the problem? Or do you think something like this is not enough to really satisfy magnitude of this issue?
Yeah, yes and no. So I think the problem slide here is a little bit too broad, and maybe they are deliberately doing that to make this a $1 trillion market. Immediate questions that come to mind. What kind of building materials are we talking about? What kinds of buildings are these materials going into? Are they commercial? Are they residential? Are they utilities companies? Well, the real estate market is huge and there are different aspects of it. And I wish they would actually break that down more in the problem and be more specific.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, when I look at this, I kind of am I don't have much familiarity with this space. I understand that it must be a really large problem, but it already feels like it's too much to bite off with a, pre-seed or early stage company. And then I guess they try to satisfy that with how they talk about the residential focus. But again, I think to your point, maybe it's more than just what the residential focus is. It's really around kind of the types of materials they look to specialize in. So when you look at a slide like this, role-based collaborative procurement solution, does that make sense to you? Are they helping us understand the solution effectively here?
I think that unfortunately this is also very broad. I can't understand from this slide what exactly they do. So for example, okay, it seems like there's a software component, but are they also delivering the materials? Are they involved in, actually the physical movement, the logistical movement of materials? Do you buy the materials through here, or is it just organization of what you would buy? What exactly this is, I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really funny because if anyone's been watching these videos, I've always talk about kind of being extremely clear with what you do. So much so it impacted the way we create decks, where we actually create this one-liner and put it on a slide, make sure people don't miss it, and try to make it as clear as possible. And all of that was inspired by you, Elizabeth, several years ago when we were kind of starting everything out. I just always have in the back of my head, some deck we were looking at or, working on together where you were like, I still don't understand what this company does. And I just constantly kind of come back to that whenever I'm reviewing these decks. And it's always just in the back of our head is just, this is like the simplest, most important thing that a lot of people get wrong or gloss over is just like the super direct communication of what this company does. And I just remember you calling that out, and it's inspired a lot of like, our reviews here. So it's
Well,
funny to
thank
hear
you.
you kind of say it again. But yeah, I totally agree. I think the terms here, like role-based collaborative procurement solution, just feels really jumbled. And it sounds maybe cool, but I really would have to kind of like read through all of this to kind of get what they're doing. And I think it's a little bit missing the point. I think something like really, again, clear market, clear product, then we show how it works in this type of slide potentially. So moving on, they do try to zero their focus in on residential and have this pretty unique, like bottoms up market sizing slide that is quite early in the deck relative to kind of like what's traditional. Do you think that this is kind of a response to that? Like we need to focus on some component of this $1 trillion market. What are your thoughts when you see this?
Yeah, I think so. So for me as a very early stage investor, I generally believe that markets are huge. Even if you're going after a niche, there's always something peripheral you can go after that. And especially in real estate, I'm not worried about finding a big market here. That being said, many other investors do like to see this type of slide. So I understand that that's probably where this is coming from. I think the thing that I'm struggling to understand on this slide, if I were to make it better, is to understand sort of the different stages or tiers better. Like I think I don't quite understand what this is. My interpretation is in the first 5 years, they're going after strictly residential, but I think even within that, I don't even know who their buyer is. And then in the next 5 years after that, they're going after hospitality and industrial use cases where people presumably buy more materials. I mean, this is just me and reading between the lines, but this doesn't really clarify things because I don't know how they make money. Like, are they taking a percentage on sales of materials? Is this a subscription fee? Who are they selling to? Like, I don't know if the contract value feels high or low. Like, this
Yeah.
feels like it's lacking a lot of context. And I generally would not put a market slide in the middle of the deck because you have none of that context. And maybe that will be clarified in the next few slides.
Yeah, yeah. I think while we have you, I feel like this is like a hot topic in like in the space, or at least I've made it a hot topic. I'm curious, like especially in these early stage pitch decks, some people go with these like really kind of detailed projection roadmaps. In the next 5 years, we hope to make like $100 million because of all of this stuff, and then I always feel like it either results in a lack of ambition, where it's like they're trying to play too small or too slow, or it just feels like too hard to kind of like really justify because you're still at the earliest stage. And I worry that sometimes these projections hurts credibility. But I'm curious your take when you think about like putting something like this or like revenue projections over 10 years or something like that in an early stage pitch deck like this.
I completely agree. I call it the Goldilocks and the Three Bears problem.
Yeah.
You are either too hot or too cold. It's hard to get it just right. And to this point, every investor is looking for something different in terms of what is just right. I do think, though, so there's this fine line that founders have to walk between selling the high level dream and then talking about tactics of how you're going to
Mhm.
get there. And it's a very fine line to walk because sometimes I see people go too detailed and of course nothing ever goes to plan. And then sometimes I see decks that are too pie in the sky, but you're like, I don't understand how you're going to get there. So
Yeah.
this is the hard part, like walking that fine line. And I think what I would like to see, whether it's on this slide or the build up to this slide, is what are the ladder rungs that lead us to this market? I think the assumptions here are, number one, we're actually able to sell building materials for cheaper because we are making the supply chain more efficient. There's zero talk about how that happens, but if you can establish that that's true, then you can establish why you're able to take a 15% take rate, assuming that that's on the building materials sales. And then once we establish that, then it's like, okay, if we sell X amount of building materials, which by the way is totally possible because, half of New York builds that in 2 months anyway, then it's like, okay, I can understand how we get there. But we have not heard any of the assumptions, the prior ladder rungs to get us to this stage. Like, we don't know how we make money except for this one little bit on this slide. We don't know what the assumptions are around improving efficiencies in the buying process. That has not been talked about at all. So we need sort of a better lead up to understand this story arc.
Yeah, yeah. You need to understand and appreciate that there is if, things go really well, we have a model and, a market size that if we crush out of the park, it's reasonable to see this company turn into a potential unicorn or, have that kind of like true power law outcome. Is that kind of like the playback?
Yeah, I don't like the level of math in all of these decks does not need to be done on a spreadsheet. It's all back of the envelope of if we assume, X number of people have this problem and we can take Y dollars from them because of these reasons, then that's how you get to the market. Like that's it.
Exactly.
So as a pre-seed company, certainly, I think if you're doing any amount of revenue as a pre-seed company, then, that immediately puts your name in the hat. I think it sounds like their customers that they have whom they're working with are fairly marquee, and to be able to get that is great. So all of these things sort of check those boxes. But I think what I would better want to understand here is again the why of the problem. Like, why are these people buying? And that really isn't very clear anywhere in the deck. Like, what is making them so efficient in this buying process that these people have to buy from them as opposed to their typical workflow? But the
100%.
results show that it's pretty amazing that they've been able to at least get these people to go outside of their workflow, which in itself is a feat.
I like that a lot. I think like they're well positioned here. They have, it looks like, 4 legitimate customers. I think I'd like to know kind of like a little bit more about these customers. Like, let's say, you have a little stat next to Domatic and tell us how many properties they manage or, develop. But I think like even just a simple case study slide where kind of highlight the main customer, tell the story, of what the problem that they have is, what value you've created for them, a quote, and then make it clear that it's a repeatable motion with a lot of potential customers. It helps people put 2 and 2 together on the stuff we were talking about earlier, that this could really kind of scale. So I think it's a great point. This is a competitor slide.
Yeah, so competitor slides are tricky because traditionally investors want to understand how are you going to win in a big way. So who is like the big player in this space, not the other startups, but who's the big player in this space that you have to essentially be an alternative to, and why is it that you win against that alternative? So for example, in sales, if you're building a new CRM, you would put Salesforce or somebody here. So that's a piece of feedback for them. I think what I'm still confused by, and it was alluded to a little bit in the last slide, which is how are they getting these cost savings? Is it they're cutting out a middleman? Is it that the workflow is so archaic it's done on pen and paper and their software alone captures 20%, which I find honestly a little bit hard to believe in itself. So how exactly they're able to do that, I think, is also the crux to the competition of how they're able to beat whoever the big competitor is in the space, and I don't even know who that is. So it sounds like actually they're just competing on cost, which I generally don't love because somebody can always reduce their prices, and a lot of big players will reduce their prices even if it means they won't be profitable for a while because they want to drive any would-be competition out of the space, and that is a common tactic that big companies will do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think like, yeah, you're getting into the like this thing about working with manufacturers with flexible commission rate versus working with distributors. It's like the beginning of a point that could turn into, kind of like that fully comprehensive logical through line throughout the deck of what makes us different, what makes us, provide value to our customers better than the existing solutions or the existing market, as well as these competitors. But I think like, we're already thinking a little too hard on it, and you don't really have that much time. So I think we need to be a lot more prescriptive with how we differentiate here and how that impacts our business model and, our ability to provide value to the large amount of customers that are spending a lot of money in this space. So it all kind of needs to come together, and I think that this is lacking. So to be honest, like this slide doesn't quite compute for me. I'm curious if this lands with you, or you're in the same boat as me?
Kind of both. So I think in the first slide or one of the initial slides, they talked a little bit about, you know, being able to suggest materials for climate reasons. And I
Mm-hmm.
imagine that's what this is about, where, you know, due to regulatory or high pressure, people are starting to think about building materials that may make
Yeah.
sense in this day and age. And as a result, suggesting materials could be a good part of this business, is what I think this is saying. And so, more
Yeah.
than just the cost savings, they're making product recommendations of a more optimal material or part, is what I'm guessing, and probably can then optimize on the take on that as well, is what I'm guessing. But it feels
Yeah.
like it's a little bit out of left field after we have not talked about that the whole deck, and then all of a sudden we're talking about that.
Cool. And that's it. So, Elizabeth, curious your high level take as you run through this.
I do think this deck needs to be buttoned up a bit more in the story around all of these pieces we talked about. Like, what is the fundamental insight as to how they are saving money for their customers? Is it because they're cutting out a middleman? Is it because they're suggesting cheaper materials that are better for the environment? Is it because they're able to improve the workflow so much with the software, or all of the above, whatever that is? Being able to crisply articulate that insight is the thing that is missing from this. And then everything else that stems from that, I think, will get clarified. But that's the thing that I feel like we kind of got lost around. I would say that for some of the competitors they've listed, a lot of them also are going after a similar space, but may not have the same insight. And so that insight is extra important because everyone's got a different opinion or a different take on a business. And that is ultimately what investors are backing: you and your set of insights.
Yeah. Super well said. I think, I think that's super valuable feedback. Very well said. I think that calls it for the pitch deck run through. So we have a little bit of an update. I'm taking a break from the Second Opinion videos on a biweekly cadence and have been working with the Hustle Fund team to transition Second Opinion to their team, where they're going to be still doing a lot of pitch deck reviews and all sorts of things. And Elizabeth will be able to talk about it. Our partnership still is alive and well, and we're going to look to do other things together in the future. It's been a real pleasure doing these videos and engaging with everybody that has engaged with these videos. And I will always be around to help with pitch deck advice as you need it. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Alex. And also thank you to Mark if he's watching this as well. You know, we love the Deck Doctors. We've worked with the Deck Doctors as a customer on our own pitch decks for Hustle Fund, and many of our portfolio companies have worked with them as well, and they've seen wonders in their fundraisers. So, you know, I think certainly we've had the opportunity to talk with lots of different, you know, folks who also consult on pitches or whatever. But ultimately, like, the Deck Doctors are the folks whom we have found to be absolutely amazing and refer everyone to, with zero conflicts of interest on that. And so we won't be strangers, but we are making some changes to this particular programming for Second Opinion. I think what we're going to do going forward, since it's been a lot of lift, especially on Alex's part, to do this, you know, every other week, and he's got a busy startup that he has to run, we're going to change it up a bit. We're going to continue it. You're going to continue to get great feedback on all of these decks, and we're going to bring in different guests over the next several months and years to come in and give their opinions, their second opinions on various decks. So we will continue this. So if you have a deck that you want us to review, there will be another guest coming in to take a look, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. It's going to be awesome. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate you taking the time and running through this with me. It was really fun, and I think it'll be very valuable for the listeners and viewers. And you'll be back in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks to all of you.